Under the leadership of Governor Ron DeSantis, the Florida Department of Education has mandated that middle school history curriculums must include teaching that there were benefits to some people from slavery because of the skills they developed. Yes, the benefits of slavery. And in the document that was put forth by the DOE, they gave 16 examples of individuals who benefited. Turns out that many of those people were not slaves in the first place or were freed before they gained their skills. Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, it's Dr. David. So, in another repugnant, disgusting action taken by the state of Florida's government, they have literally come out, and let me read this exactly to you, with the statement that said that the educators have to include that slaves developed skills which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. Okay? Now, this is, already the state has been accused of doing things to disenfranchise and to intimidate voters because and a high proportion of those people are Black individuals. They still refuse to acknowledge that systemic racism was a formative part of the formation of our country, i.e., through slavery, but other things as well. And of course, the systemic racism still exists today. Now, are you overly surprised? I guess nothing surprises anymore that the state is now wanting to teach about the benefits of slavery. Okay. Now, let's first and all say there are no benefits of slavery. There never ever was, and there never ever will be. Okay. We're talking frickin' slavery here. We shouldn't even be mentioning the words benefit and slavery in the same sentence, unless you want to make it negative. Now, why am I talking about this? So, as a holistic pediatrician, of course, I am involved in my patients and in children's education, helping people choose like what kind of education they may want, etc. And this type of statement, at least in the public school system, is impacting all children, not just that it can minimize this and create a mental health impact, because if Black children are hearing a minimization of slavery, of hearing any kind of positive tone put to it, that can be pretty confusing to them, right? Because I'm sure that almost all of them, if not all of them, were taught about the evils of the things that probably happened to their ancestors. Okay. Now, also on top of that, this could be confusing to any child because, again, most children by middle school have heard about slavery in our country and would not necessarily be thinking in terms of those benefits. So there can be confusion all over the place. Okay. Now, as far as this being added to the curriculum, okay, this implies that, first of all, that the enslaved people who benefited wouldn't have obtained their skills for slavery. Right. So how disrespectful is that to think that if these individuals weren't slaves, that they benefited from it, so they couldn't have possibly gained it in any other way, right? No, because that's what the benefit would be, something that they would have not gotten otherwise. Now, it is so disrespectful to these individuals who are listed. Like, what was this, on the job training? Was it an unpaid internship in their eyes? I don't know, but it's just steam coming out of my ears proverbially here. Now, as far as this, let's talk about the realities of slavery, okay? Now, in slavery, people were completely dehumanized. They were whipped. They were raped. And they got away with it, okay? Families were torn apart, right? You wanted to sell some slaves, but not other slaves. Kids were separated from their parents. Now, let me ask, did these individuals benefit from slavery because they were given food, shelter, clothing? Oh, the slave owners, they were just so generous by giving those people because, they benefited by having the shelter, by having clothing and food, right? They may not have survived without it. So, gee, how kind of the slave owners to provide that. What a benefit to them. Because, anyways, now, as far as our governor, Ron DeSantis, now, he actually has a checkered past. And when it comes to making racially charged statements in the first place, you may remember back in 2018, during the governor's race, he expressed concern about Andrew Gillum, who was Florida Democratic Party's first ever African American nomination. And DeSantis actually openly talked about how he was concerned about and encouraging people not to vote for Gillum because he may monkey it up. He may monkey up the economy of the election. Now, that may not sound like to me, but I'll tell you what, that is a dog whistle right there. One shouldn't be equating black people with monkeys, right? We should know about that, right? So to even put those two in the same sentence, that's a racially charged statement. Now, also, he had a 2011 book called Dreams of Our Founding Fathers, which seemed to be a swipe at Obama's book Dreams of My Father. But in this book, he slammed Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall for saying that the founding fathers were hypocritical for permitting slavery if there was to be freedom for all. So he actually attacked Thurgood Marshall for saying that. Okay. Now, also in his book, he mentioned that the 3/5 compromise. So this was something where slaves, for accounting purposes, were considered 3/5 of a human, right? They weren't a full human, but black people were 3/5 of a human. And that he said that that for the purpose of representation in government, that it benefited the anti-slavery states. So again, benefit. What is with this guy and benefiting African American people, be it slaves or just in terms of how, again, you shouldn't talk about benefits and slavery in the same sentence, okay? But what kind of mind would ever think in any way, shape, or form that calling a black person 3/5 of a person would be beneficial in any way, right? That's just, where's the mind going with this? What kind of person does this kind of thing over and over again? Okay. Now, as far as this particular issue with the schools, okay, the Florida Department of Education responded to the criticism about the slavery benefits. And they said that their comments were factual and well documented. And then the department went on to list 16 different people who they say benefited from their times as being slaves. Okay. Now, as part of this, they actually cited two resources. One called The Colored Patriots of the American Revolution, which is a book in 1895 by William Cooper Neal, and also the Encyclopedia of African American History, 1619 to 1895, which was a book in 2006 by Paul, who was edited by Paul Finkelman. Okay. Now, those were the citations, and they went ahead in this release that they did where they actually list the individual names and what the jobs are that they got benefit from. But the Tampa Bay Times recently, and I put the link to this in the description down below, okay, actually did a deeper dive in this. And they found that many of these people were either freed ahead of time or were never slaves in the first place, okay? And of course, that means that if they develop those skills in those non-situations, they shouldn't have been on this list in the first place. Now, all of the examples are actually in that link, but I'm going to give you a few choice ones here, okay? Booker T. Washington, okay, is listed on the state list as an educator, okay? Now, Booker T. Washington, as you may know from our own history classes, he was an author, he was an orator, he was an advisor to several United States presidents, okay? Now, he was enslaved, and he worked in mines as in mines and also as a houseboy, but he was freed at 9 years old. Okay, so obviously he developed those oratory educational skills not as a slave, but as a free man, right? So I guess there was no benefit to that guy's slavery, right? Lewis Latimer. Now, this was a blacksmith that was born into slavery in 1848. And he was freed in 1852 at 4 years of age. Yeah, I'm sure lots of 4-year-olds developed their skills in slavery, melting iron and other minerals at 4 years of age, right? So he was not a slave after 4 years of age. So again, somebody who wasn't a slave who got skills that the state is saying that slavery benefited them. Now, there is actually a museum that is dedicated to Mr. Latimer, and it says that he was actually self-educated. He worked as an inventor, participating in the development of the telephone and incandescent lighting, among other inventions. So, of course, shouldn't the aspect of all he accomplished after being a slave at 4 years old be the thing that we should be teaching? That he was able to overcome intense adversity by being born into a family of slaves, technically a slave himself, and then obviously went on to all these great accomplishments afterwards. Now, Florida lists James Forten As a shoemaker that was born into slavery in 1766, he escaped in 1784 when he was 18 years old. But the Museum of the American Revolution actually describes this gentleman as a black entrepreneur who was born to free parents. Okay, so his parents weren't slaves. He was never a slave in the first place, and he actually served as a privateer on ships during the Revolutionary War. And he became a wealthy sailmaker, but not because he benefited from slavery. Okay, now Paul Cuffey. Now this was he was listed in Florida list as a shoemaker and a ship owner that was born into slavery and escaped freedom in 1781. Now, according to the website paulcuffey.org, which is operated by the Westport Historical Society, yes, he was born in 1759 to an emancipated slave. Having worked, and then they said, having worked on whaling boats starting at age 14, he established a shipping business in Massachusetts. So again, none of the skills would have been while he was a slave. Okay, good job, Florida. What are you going to have these other misstatements also be put in the education and in the textbooks also? Okay, so what are my thoughts on this whole thing? Now, first of all, I realize that Florida teachers are scared. Okay, they've already been limited in terms of what they can say in their teaching plans. What we've seen with LGBTQ plus issues, with the "don't say gay," right? We know about that is where they can't even identify who themselves are, can't use gender pronouns properly that people request, etc. Now, many teachers are afraid to stand up against this and to say anything that could go against this right-wing agenda. Okay, now hopefully, because this is going to be taught in a middle school classroom, maybe the teachers will present this information and about slavery. They will be learning about slavery overall, of course, the darkest and most disgusting part probably of all of American history. But maybe the teachers can actually open up to these kids who probably have learned about slavery already, and maybe they can offer it to a class discussion. Maybe they can discuss it. Maybe these children could come to a better conclusion than the state of Florida has, and maybe they will stand up really quickly and say, hey, there are no benefits to slavery. Have a nice day.